You're listening to Salford City Radio 94.4 FM with Jimmy Petruzzi on the Friday Sports Show. We've got a really interesting show lined up for you this evening. We've got a guest we've had on previously, Chris Honor, who's going to join us shortly. And we've got another guest later on as well who's going to join us, which is going to be quite fascinating. And we're going to talk about all things football today, development, the community, women's football. And who better to talk about women's football than our first guest, Chris Honor, who has worked in the community. With Grimsby, he was the strength and conditioning coach at Sheffield United women's first team. He also worked with Bury. And I had the pleasure one time to join him at the club as well. And he's to deliver some work myself. And he's a professional guy who's got a lot of experience, runs his own gym, and he's working also with international students in Manchester as well. So, Chris, welcome to the show, mate. Great to have you on board.
Cheers, Jimmy. Thanks for inviting us. Good to catch up.
Yeah, no, great to have you on the show. And Chris, just on the subject of sort of women's football, you've been in the game now for a long time. You've sort of seen the game, and last time we spoke about the importance of women's football carrying on and keeping the ascendancy going after the World Cup, so to speak. What are your thoughts in terms of the publicity women's football gets outside major tournaments? Do you think that they get enough publicity outside big tournaments, or is this my impression that come the big tournament, everyone gets involved, but it's just a shame that that same sort of interest and media coverage doesn't happen all year round? Is that sort of fair to say, or what are your thoughts? You better placed than me to comment on that.
Yeah, I think so, to be honest, because there's a big lack of consistency with it. It's almost like a fashion thing, if you like, because it's like one thing comes into fashion, everyone wants a bit of it, and then after a few weeks it sort of dies down a bit. I mean, it's great. I mean, there's a big development within the women's game at the minute in regards to some of the smaller clubs getting involved. You look at the likes of Leeds, doing really well. But it would just be a bit nice if there's a bit more publicity around it, really. I know the BBC are trying the hardest to cover the women's game a bit more, but we need it in the prime time slots, I think, so that more people can be introduced to it a bit more.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's sort of one of the goals of the show. I mean, for me, one of the goals of the show is to bring people news from around the world in the local area, but also make sure that we get behind sports that don't necessarily get the mainstream coverage as much as I think they deserve to get. And whether that's sort of women's football, whether that's Olympic sports, whatever it is, and it's sort of getting people out there and we've got to keep the momentum going, because it's sport's a big thing for the community, but it's not easy. And the point being is that from a financial point of view, Chris, how hard is it to? I mean, obviously your role in the game has been a coach, but you must have an insight in terms of what it's like to, for teams to survive, week by week. Is it tough?
Yeah, it's really hard. A lot of it depends on the size of the club. I mean, at very pre-season, we were struggling with just trying to get sponsors, to be honest. I mean, we were fortunate that we've got some of the parents of the players were actually involved within some companies that were looking for a bit of marketing opportunities, and we've managed to seize on that. Fortunately, we've managed to secure some we've got some training gear from Massey Coldback, which was really good of them through a contact of one of the players, which is great. But I think it's not just within the women's game of football. I think it's across sports in general, at sort of grassroots level as well, because of the cost of anything and everything these days. It's some companies are finding it out of their budget, if you like, to actually get it. It is really, really hard. Sometimes we actually find that ourselves having to put money into it, put our hand in our own. Things like footballs and other such likes. I mean, there's some clubs that will that have got funds and that are more willing, if you like, to put money into developing their teams. Bury being a very good example of that. Sheffield United did a really good job of it as well, from previous experience. But yeah, I mean, it would be good to see a lot more companies wanting to especially get involved with the women's game, but also within community projects as well, because the FA are battling hard to to get different projects off the ground, such as the SSE Wildcats, which is sponsored by the Energy Firm SSE. It would be nice to have a lot more going on, because I believe that there's a couple of projects nationally that have folded as a result of no funding, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective, and obviously, you're in the front line in one sense. You're doing it, you're living it, and like you says, I mean, when you've got to fund out of your own pockets, it's not easy. Obviously, people have got their own lives as well, and bills to pay, and it's not easy. One would expect, and it's not a case as well, Chris, where obviously, at the very highest level, there's an irony where people are paid the most. They probably, I mean, don't get me wrong, a lot of players, they do give to charity, do a lot of good things as well. So I want to make sure that I don't want to ever go up players at the highest levels. They do their fair share as well. But the point being is that, people like yourself, of this world, I think sometimes you don't always get the credit deserved from a media point of view, because, you're out there and, whatever the situation is, Rail, I know you love what you do, and you're very passionate about it, but when it sort of impacts on funding, it mustn't be easy, because, life isn't easy in general to make ends meet for a lot of people, and that can be tough. And are there ever times, Chris, you're quite a positive person from what I can see, but is there ever times you get disheartened and think, I just can't sustain this type thing, and,
Yeah, of course. I mean, you've got to look at this. There's two ways you got to look at it. You got to look at the realistic side of it. You got to look at it financially. How's it impacts on you financially? How's it impacts on your personal life? And also how's it going to benefit your career as well? And there are areas sometimes where you do question. Sometimes where you do question whether you're doing enough, whether there's more you can do, whether you feel appreciated. I mean, we had yourselves down delivering a fantastic talk a couple of weeks ago, which the players massively benefited from. So again, thank you for your time on that one. And we do often rely on, especially at grassroots level, we do rely heavily on people willing to give the time up, just to buy into our vision to make better performing athletes.
No, absolutely, and I think thanks for your kind words, Chris. I really enjoy working with the players, and for me, having been there myself as an athlete, a sports person, and a coach, I know what it's like. So giving back for me is a big thing, and certainly that's been one of my big motivations for the show, is to sort of uncover the next generation of sports people and sort of get it out there, and just to make sure that people are aware that sport does need sponsorship, sport does need backers, but also sometimes people think that it's not always about money too. It's just about a bit of time here as well. So a bit of voluntary work, if people can spare it. I know people's times are times as limited, is not easy, but even like finding an hour here or there, it really goes a long way. So I mean, it's not always about money, it's also about resources and time too, because that's a big thing as well. But I think that on a positive note, with people like yourself in the game, I've every confidence that it'll keep moving forward. And this community here, Chris, in Salford as well, it's such a strong community, and we've experienced the rugby league club doing really well this season. Unfortunately, maybe it wasn't the result they wanted in the end, but to make the final, and that was a fantastic achievement in itself. But we've got the football club nearby as well, which is doing really, really well. In your own experience, of working in the community, what are some of the key things? I mean, I think for me, obviously Salford as a professional club gets involved in the community, and they've got a lot of experience, at the club. But from your point of view, what are some of the key things that a club can do to foster good relationships in the community, Chris? What can a club do to make sure that they're active? What are some of the things that you learnt in your time at Grimsby?
I mean, fundamentally, it's about having a good network and knowing the right people to go to. What you've got to do is not just within getting involved in the community, but just in general for your life skills. Just creating the right environment, getting the right people. You look at what Salford are doing in a minute. 5-6 years ago, Salford City were playing in the Northern Premier, and now you look at the fantastic work that people like Chris Casper and Wayne Giggs, Gary Neville are doing behind the scenes to raise the profile of the club. You know, they're utilising the people that they know. They're getting the people, the likes of David Beckham, who himself is a big brand, to you know, to get people involved. They've established a fantastic setup at Salford City Lionesses, who are playing within a good standard, I believe, within the Manchester leagues at the moment. They've got, you know, they're utilising the network of contacts really, really well, which in turn is bringing a good community feel to the city of Salford, especially. And obviously, you touched upon the rugby league as well. You look at how they've progressed in the last few years. 2 or 3 years ago, they were playing in the Championship. They got the million. I think they got the million. They won the £1 billion game. And you know, and through positivity and through motivation, and you know, keeping the right players on board and establishing good links with the community, they've managed to get a good feel around the city of Salford. I was down there at the weekend actually watching the team I follow, Cambridge United, against Salford City, and the atmosphere down at the Peninsula Stadium was absolutely fantastic because of the buzz that's going on, and because with Salford City playing at home, and then the Super League club again playing that evening. You could feel the buzz the minute you walked in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Like completely agree. No, it's a fantastic feeling. It's like, at the moment, the only thing I would say, Chris, and I don't know what your thoughts are, at the moment I think it's really important that, you know, that we capitalise from the point of view that you know, both clubs are doing relatively well. You know, obviously the football club's got the backing and you know, has every reason to continue doing well. The rugby league club obviously doesn't have that sort of financial backing, and they've done really well based on the resources they've got. But it's still very important that the momentum keeps going. And I know one thing's for sure, you mentioned the likes of Chris. I know for sure he's going to emphasise on youth development. That's 100% for sure. He's very big on youth development. He's a fantastic, you know, coach himself, and he understands development more than anybody. But how important it is to sort of strike while the iron's hot, metaphorically speaking, to make sure, because sometimes you see that, you know, certain clubs, when things aren't going well, but how important do you think it is when things are going well, like, you know, from the point of view to sort of keep building those links, you know, keep going and make sure that, you know, when things are going well, to sort of carry on building a foundation to move forward with?
You've definitely got to build upon it as much as you can. You've got to ultimately get as much exposure, as much coverage of the highlights there, because at the end of the day, it is building on that success. I mean, you look at the likes of what happened with Leicester City in 2015. They won the Premier League, and they're still you know, they're still capitalising on it now, 4 years later. There's something on Instagram. There was a guy that was working at Dock and Inlet on an athletic performance benefit, from an athletic performance point of view. And one of the first things he said was former Premier League winner Dock and Inlet, and straight away people think, you know, who won the Premier League in 2015. It was Leicester. They're relating with it, and they've got to keep doing that. And when you get any form of success, you'll always build it back. If you're an athlete, you look at how many titles you won, how many promotions did you win. As a manager, you look at how many cup finals did you get to, what were your league positions. You have to look to what's happened this morning. Phil Parkinson has just been appointed as manager of Sunderland, and a big part of that would be because of his commitment and his integrity to Bolton Wanderers, help them through the dark times. So
absolutely.
Yeah, so, you know, looking at the reputations, looking at what the persons and what the teams have been through, will have a big impact on attracting the right personnel and sponsorship, and how people want to get involved. Whereas if it's something that's not a big thing, a lot of people unfortunately don't really want to get involved. So
absolutely.
Identify the key thing, and once you've got a key seller, if you like, you've got to utilise. You've got to pounce on it as often as you can. You've got to exploit it to an extent. I don't mean exploit it in a bad way. You've got to, you know, how's that going to benefit you? How's it going to benefit the community?
Absolutely. Absolutely, Chris. That's a great point. And, you know, I mean, for sure, I think sometimes, you know, I suppose not necessarily like singing from the rooftops, but it is important to make sure that, you know, people know you're out there and what's going on. And you know, it's not easy, as you all know. It's tough to sort of get to the top, but staying there is equally, if not even more tough. You know, it's one thing winning a Premier League, but then doing it back to back. Or one thing getting promoted, but staying up is another thing altogether. So it's really important to keep momentum going. With yourself, I believe you're working at the IH Manchester. Can you tell us a bit about that? What you're doing there? What's that all about? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So International Manchester was actually set up 2006. So it was set up by Nick and Peter. Peter's a teacher, and Nick was working within football with Blackburn Rovers at the time. So it's been going about 13 years. So what happens there is we have students, international students, come over on anything from a 12-week up to 12-month education and football package. So what will happen? Typical day would be, so say yesterday, for example, they're in the classroom undergoing some strength and conditioning, or some fitness, the fitness elements of their BTEC diploma, and then in the afternoon they'll be playing football. It's they've got a really good foundation that they build on with that, because it allows students and potential players that want to have the opportunity to go into a professional environment. What it does is it exposes them to ex-professional players. So, for example, this afternoon I'm going to be working with Frank Sinclair, ex-Chelsea and current Bacup Borough assistant manager, and they get, so Frank and I will be working together with these students, and they're able to benefit from his vast experience as a Premier League footballer, as an international footballer, and of course as a coach, because opportunities like this are few and far between. And what they've got going there is absolutely fantastic. And then it's coming Monday, and then in about 6 months' time we'll have what we call a showcase event where we invite non-league scouts, we invite professional scouts to come in. It's open to males and females as well. We've got 2 sites, one being on the Ellesmere Port, which has students doing the GCSEs over there, and of course the base here in Manchester, where we've got students. We've got roughly about 30 students roughly, including a partnership with Abbey College in Manchester. And yeah, it's something that's going from strength to strength. We're building great links internationally as well, and providing not just locally, but a wider opportunities for the bigger community, if you like. And and opening, hopefully opening some doors to a better quality of life for these international students.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And when you say like open door, are they looking to play professionally, or like from that point of view, is that their goal, Chris, for the players?
It is ultimately. I mean, they come over with ultimately the English game's deemed as the best league within Europe, within the world.
Yeah.
And also, these guys want to be part of that. We've got players that maybe aren't quite at the standard yet, but the good thing about it is these guys will come in and we evaluate them on a regular basis. Through matching who delivers the BTEC, he'll give them some constructive criticisms on areas that they're doing really well on, areas they need to improve on. And for myself, we'll be testing, we'll be doing 6 weekly fitness tests, and again,
fantastic,
giving them feedback and additional support that they need in order to support their long-term athlete development program, which will work with the players individually and as a collective. So there's a lot going on there at the moment. But ultimately, the dream is there to be a professional footballer.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you give them the platform as well to be the best they can be. With people like yourself who've got a vast experience, and obviously Sinclair, who sort of knows the game, and you got people doing education too. So it's a good thing for them. At least they're learning and studying. And I think as an experience point of view, all anyone can ask is to be the best they can be and see what happens. That's the sort of... Yeah, no, so interesting stuff. And I suppose you give them the chance, Chris, to be the best they can be, and that's all anyone can ask for as a sports person. Just be the best you can be and see where the road takes you. That's got to be the goal. And just, you also, amongst everything else that you do, you run your own fitness centre too, and I know you work with some really high-profile athletes as well. And what's it like running your own centre? How's that getting on in terms of, do you predominantly work with sports people at the centre, or do you work with people outside sport too?
As well, yeah, it's mainly athletes I'm working with. I've got currently got Bacup Borough FC player in a minute, Dave Williams, who's actually he was in the centre about half an hour, 40 minutes ago actually. So I've just not long finished a session with Dave, and he's been in for a while. But I have got a couple of sort of general public coming in as well. Helping out with weight loss and muscular functional training as well. Because ultimately, it's not all about working with athletes. It's giving back in the community as well. And everybody wants to perform to the best stage, whether that's mentally, physically, improve the range of motion, have a more comfortable movements, if you like. It sounds bizarre, but if you sat at a desk all day and you find your back's round it quite a bit. If you're a computer, quite a bit, and then you can come away from the desk with back pain, and sometimes you can't identify as to why that's the case. So I'll have a look at these athletes, if you like, that come in, and have a look at a bit of postural correction as well to improve the range of movement, because ultimately everybody is an athlete. As long as they're doing some form of training. So,
absolutely. For sure. For sure. And I know from experience, sometimes if I'm sat by the desk doing some emails or a dissertation or some research, it's just one of them really. I think that our modern lifestyle, sometimes it's important to be as active as one can be. That's for sure. But also, someone like yourself who's got a vast amount of experience, it's great for someone who, even if they're not involved in sport, to get that sort of quality care that you would give an athlete, because obviously the margins in sport and the impact in sport are a whole different ballgame, I would think. But obviously in general everyday life, we all want to function the best we can. Absolutely. Absolutely. No, it's interesting stuff. So, but, I really want to thank you for coming on board the show, because it's been great speaking to you. And no doubt we'll have you back on again and, keep tabs of where you're up to and what you're doing and that sort of stuff. But, just finally, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, have you got like any details, sort of, if anyone's sort of looking to get involved in anything that you do, or any sort of, if anything you do resonates with anyone that's been listening, is there any way they can get in touch with yourself or?
Sure, yeah. I mean, they can get in touch with me on the Facebook page through Train with Honour Elite Performance. So Honour spelled HONOR. So yeah, Train with Honour Elite Performance on Facebook. On Instagram, train_with_honour_coaching on Instagram. Or if you just do a general Google search on Chris Honour or Train with Honour, and something should come up.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, feel free to get in.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of them, really. I think that, someone who's doing great work like yourself, I mean, there's people out there who may be interested to reach out, and if nothing else, just to see what you do and what you're up to as well, work-wise. But it's been great having you on board the show, Chris. Have a fantastic day, mate, and we'll speak soon, buddy.
No, thanks for having me on, Jimmy. All the best, buddy. I'll speak to you soon.
Cheers, Tup. Really fascinating insight from our next guest into what it's like to work with athletes, footballers, people in general looking to achieve various goals, and perhaps he can share a bit of motivation and help potentially people who might be lacking a bit of motivation to train and also stay focused. So our next guest is a performance coach as well, Paul Oldham. Welcome to the show. Great to have you on board.
Cheers, Jimmy. Thanks very much for having me. Thank you.
No, fantastic. And prior to coming on the show, we were speaking to a interesting guest, who you're really familiar with, Chris, and he talked about, performance coaching and what he did in the women's game and so on and so forth. And one thing that sort of struck me is a common theme is how sport is really communal. And your fitness centre, obviously in Barrie, and you work outside and around different areas too, has that communal feel. So let's sort of start with, the work you're doing in football at the moment. How's that getting on, Paul? How are you sort of finding combining the roles and getting involved in football hands-on as well as running the centre?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really enjoying it. Obviously, I'm in a lucky position that we've got 5 top-class coaches at Body Influence, so it helps free my time a little bit to do other things. I really value variety and getting out there, meeting different people, and not just being in one area. It's one of my values that I enjoy doing. So I've had to build a team of people, which allows me some flexibility and freedom to do that. But 3-4 years ago, I wouldn't have had the chance to do that. So I'm really enjoying the freedom, getting out, meeting new people, helping different types of people's football teams, cage fighters, boxers. I really enjoy that. So that every day is different for me, which is important to me. Yeah,
no, it's really interesting because, like, I mean, we spoke last year, and I think it was last year, and you were involved in doing some work with Ramsbottom at the time, and they had a successful period too. And I said in my infinite wisdom, whilst I didn't know a great deal about the work you were doing there, we sort of spoke about it. I felt there was no coincidence that someone like yourself, who's got that positive energy about you and that sort of focus, that it was going to rub off on them. And for me, it's really important as a coach to be really forward thinking and look for different ways to improve the team and so on and so forth. And how have you found the experience this season at Bacup, getting involved with the lads and that sort of stuff? I mean, lads obviously taken to you as well, but how have you sort of found it week in, week out?
Yeah, I mean, I've loved it, Johnson. Again, it takes me outside my comfort zone and do something new regarding more like a management role. So it's improved my leadership skills, which is obviously important for me as well as I develop as a coach and a leader. So it's been good to get that balance between being a friend, having a laugh, and then telling them, basically ordering them to do things where they respect me. But I've loved it, and I've enjoyed being creative, putting different sessions on, planning different sessions, looking at different individual needs. So I enjoy working as a group where it's team cohesion. I've also enjoyed working with younger lads one-to-one as well.
Yeah.
So working on things like I've worked for myself, Jim, like basic visualisation drills for them to do, different tactical drills for them to work on, and preparing them ready for the match. Whether it's actively being on the bench at the side or preparing them training for the game on the Saturday, speaking to on a Thursday. See where the heads are, see what language they're using, see what state of mind using. It's a great experience to help them basically improve the performance, and that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, I mean, these sort of things take time as well. I suppose, success isn't achieved overnight as well. And I think, bit by bit, step by step. And I think one of the great things about Bacup is, you've got the likes of Brent Peters, a really experienced manager who's been there, done that. And for me, he's been instrumental in putting Bacup Football Club back on the map because, the hard work he's done and he's had to do off the field sometimes, in my opinion, hasn't really been noticed by people do notice he does a lot of hard work off the field, but sometimes it's easy to sort of think, okay, it's all about on the field management, and non-league obviously where Baker's concerned, obviously he's off the field to make sure that the club's running and so on and so forth. So you've got a vastly experienced manager like that who wants to win, and obviously the likes of David Felgate as a coach. He's been there, done that at international level, and he's worked at City as well. So from that point of view, do you feel that it's been a bit, you've been a bit of a learning experience too, like, learning off the likes of Brent and Felgate, who are, probably the best in the field at what they do?
Yeah, 100%. Like you said, when you're up and close with them and you see him on a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, you see what goes on behind the scenes, and the amount of Brent is unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you think you've got a lot on, the amount of work compared to Brent is nothing. But he's very passionate, so it's all about, like you said, all that preparation comes down to winning on Saturday and what it means to actual club and Bacup itself. So he's looking at the big picture. And like I said, being close to goal, I spoke today about setting boundaries as a coach. When the time is to be nice, sometimes you have to be firm as a coach. And looking at the holistic side of coaching, not just putting on a session, things like body language and how you act around the players, what you can say to the players, what you can't say to the players. Sometimes you've got to keep your ears open and your mouth shut and observing. And again, it's all leadership. But yeah, for me at my age, I'm only 30, it's really valuable to be around people like that.
Yeah, and that's incredible. I think for me, Paul, having sort of worked closely with you, sometimes it's easy to forget that you sort of you know, well, I say only 30, that sort of shows my age, but the point being is that it's easy to forget because you got, you know, an old head, so to speak, on you know, in terms of from a mind point of view. No worries, you still look young, mate, so you're okay for that. But from the point of view, like the way you think, and in that respect, and you know, it sort of goes to show that sometimes we can think age. For me, if you're good enough, you're old enough in management as a player. I think that's the important thing. You know, if you've got the right people around you, that's the key. Have you found that like age thing and sort of people, has that ever been a barrier for you, say, in terms of, you know, people thinking, oh, he's 30 years of age, and because you might have players that are even older than you. Has that ever come up yourself, or?
I think from a point of view, or leadership, or even in seminars, or just putting a session on, you have to, it's perception of what other people think, isn't it? So you've got to go in there and basically earn the respect.
Yeah.
And I think as soon as you start talking, and they can either Google you or they do some research on you, they can see that you're very legit.
Yeah.
I think obviously a lot of people, it's easy to blog stuff, and I think once they start taking you seriously, they'll have that respect. But most people understand instantly when you know what you're talking about and why you're in a position that you're in. But don't get me wrong, you do get people, and I was working at Bacup last year, and you're working with a lot of like 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, and from all they're concerned, they just look at me as just a personal trainer, as a fitness coach.
Yes.
But that's obviously to do with their awareness of where they're up to. But I mean, people will treat you with different respect, but you've got to earn that respect, I think.
That's a great point.
By the way, from the quality of your sessions and your seminars that you do.
That's a great point, Paul. This is about earning respect. And I think this day and age, especially, not to have a go at people this day and age, but you know, certainly nowadays we sort of sometimes live in a society where people forget respect is earned and it's not given lightly. You've got to go out there and pull your sleeves up and do the hard yards, and obviously you're not afraid to work hard and be in there, and that's the sort of the important thing. And I think for me that's important for the lads. And one thing that certainly for sure I think that sort of rubbed off on the lads at Bacup from Brent, Felgate and yourself is that hard work and that the manner as well. I mean, I was up there the other week on Thursday night, and I was watching David Felgate's session. I was, you know, taking a few notes and learning myself, as you do. And I'm thinking these lads are such a respectful group of lads. It almost reminded me, Paul, years ago, many years ago, I went to visit a friend of mine who coaches at Man United, and when I walked into the ground, this is going back a long time ago, the sort of aura about the place, you know, it was at Carrington, and the young players coming up and shaking my hand and, you know, being really respectful. And I feel that's the vibe I get at Bacup as well. That sort of, you know, this is a team that's sort of managed by, you know, a man who is a disciplinarian in terms of on and off the field, and I see a lot of positives in that way. It just reminded me of the ethos that, you know, when I visited United on a few occasions, you know, a few years ago, that sort of, you know, is there. Do you get that feel too? The lads are really respectful, and, you know, a great bunch of lads who, you know, they may not have had what they deserve as yet success-wise on the pitch, but it's going to come, I'm sure of it. But do you get that vibe too? That's the sort of vibe there as well, or is that just something?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely get that vibe, and it sets from, like I said, from Felgate and from Brent, it's that discipline. So even the first preseason the training, it was all about setting the boundaries, setting the professionalism, setting the standards. And if you let, it's simple as if you're late even for a photo shoot or whatever it is, you're getting fined out the wages straight away. So it sets that professionalism, and people then respect that, and they know they're not messing around. It's not an average club or a Sunday League club. It's a high semi-pro club set with professional boundaries, and I think that's important. Because you need people to take you seriously, and then little things like everyone wearing the kit and getting there 10 minutes early, having a drink in the club in the game with a shooting, all that type of stuff. That's important, because it's all about that. And we even have nights out at Bacup, so when the nights out, for example, you don't come, you get fined.
Yes.
You can't underestimate the importance of getting the lads together, getting that bond. Because ultimately that's what wins the championships. It's that bond. So on the pitch you fight for each other, and that all set. Brand, it's simple as that, which is a good thing.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's like, you know, it comes from the manager, but also it's important to have the right staff around you to implement that and sort of respect that. And I think, you know, that's the key thing. And how important do you think it is to have like staff all singing from the same hymn sheet and sort of like, you know, all in it together? Because football's tough, you know. It can be a lonely world out there in football, obviously, you know, especially when things aren't, you know, going as well as they could be going. And the results aren't coming along. But football can be a lonely world in that respect. But how important do you think it is to be galvanised as a unit, as staff and players, to sort of, we think to some of the great teams in the history of sport, they're sort of so galvanised and they're all together and all unified. Is that really important, Paul?
Yeah, exactly. It comes from your philosophy and ethos, doesn't it? You've all got to sing from the same shit. And that's why at the start of the season, get all your team meetings, get everyone singing. If everyone's not, if no one's there and they don't get it, a couple of coaches, they're better leaving the club, because you want people who get exactly what it's all about, being able to train, working hard, going the extra mile, and then you set your team up a certain way, but you have to have everyone to buy into that philosophy. Because if you don't, then it'll go off the team. So yeah, it's absolutely vital.
Well, what's your take? And that's really interesting that you say, and obviously you've had experience of working with, different athletes across a broad range of areas. How do you compare working with the footballers, Paul, with, say, you work with the cage fighters and other athletes too? How do you compare the difference between, say, the football mentality and maybe the cage fight mentality? Is there a difference there?
There is always a difference. From my experience, the cage fight, it's a brutal mindset, and they'll get there early before training and they'll give 110% every single session. And don't get wrong, footballers do it, but there's a little bit of a different attitude, if you know what I mean, around the training. Yeah. Whereas you might work with big groups, and we're looking up against Chester Football coming soon, and that'll be good because they'll step up again, because obviously they're a conference. And obviously the more they get paid, the more they have to be there, because that's it's a commitment thing then, isn't it? Once they're getting paid, it's committed. But cage fighters, they really improve that training. It's like a fighting philosophy, and that's why I'm very passionate about martial arts and Brazilian jiu-jitsu and boxing and things like that, because they watch all the films going up like your Rocky and your Bruce Lee and things like that, and it's all about the training. Because footballers tend to want to play football in a nice day, they enjoy themselves, and you might get 20% who live, eat and breathe the training, but the rest kind of want to turn up when they want, and it needs to be kept in order. But I'd say there's a big difference with it, for working with a cage fighter compared to the average football, let's say, because there's some footballers out there who really are brutal with the training as well. I just think cage fighters get it more.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. It's individual sport as well too. I mean, football's a team game too, and I think traditions and all that sort of stuff. Really, I suppose, like you says, I mean, every individual is different anyway. But I suppose if you're sort of a cage fighter, you're making your way in the world. You really are on your own in the sense that in that ring it's you. There's nowhere. Not that in football, but you know what football's like, Paul. In a team game, you can sort of. You can have a breather when you should be tracking somebody. You can, but in cage fighting, man, if you lower that guard, you are toast, eh? And the margins are different. And is that something that sort of you've got into the psyche of cage fighters? I mean, that's a really fascinating psyche for me. I mean, could you imagine standing in front of someone and sort of? It is a tough sport, a brutal sport. Have you thought about what it's like, Paul, when you're sort of training someone? Does it cross your mind, sort of stepping into that ring, and how does it feel? In terms of from the cage fighters, what sort of feedback do you get when they're in there?
Yeah. Well, with a lot of cage fighters courses, and obviously I've learned a lot from YouTube with NLP and hypnotherapy. We've done a lot of that stuff. So you get to when you do visualization and things like that, looking at the heart rate, and it's very, very interesting. So you get very close and you get a connection. You can almost feel what it's like before you step into the cage. And we have a lot of meetings and visualization sessions on the Thursday and Friday before the fight. So this last particular fighter, we did it on the Friday, and the fight was literally within 24 hours after.
Wow.
So you can see the difference. And the ones who do well are still very relaxed all the way up to it, and they don't peak till fight night. But they're the more experienced fighters, where possibly the younger ones tend to get a bit too excited and their adrenaline's rushing a little bit too early. But they've got to keep calm, collected. They've got to be very, very focused. They've got to be in the zone. What I find with fighters, they've got to turn every single stone, because I've done work with people like Scott Quigg and stuff like that, and what you see is they've got to turn every single stone. They can't leave a stone unturned, otherwise they won't feel ready for the fight. Whereas, like you said, football, it's a team game. You might be 80% prepared, and your team might still win, and you might still have a good performance. Whereas cage fighting and boxing, there's no room to hide. It's just 1v1.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
You've got to do like a 12-week training camp leading up to that, 10 to 12 weeks or whatever it is leading up to that, where you've got to go on specific training routines like your strength and endurance, go through your conditioning where you're mimicking fighting movements, then you start going into your conditioning again, and you go into that peaking. So the best fighters keep calm all the way through, but you can see they're in the zone, and they're almost ready for the fight. If you know
yeah.
what I mean? And anything will set them off, so they've got to keep themselves in that bubble, a very good support system around them, be around people who believe in them, and then all they do is, as soon as they get into that ring and the bell goes, they can let everything go in that ring.
Yeah.
Whilst keeping composure, and then afterwards they can have a drink, do whatever they want. But
No, absolutely. Absolutely.
They've got to be in that zone all the way up to the fight, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. I remember years ago, Paul, in the off season, I used to play a number of different sports, and one off season I signed up to do boxing and Thai boxing. I was about 18, 19 years of age, and I was quite fortunate to have a really, really top boxing coach and Thai boxing coach. The Thai boxing coach was like one of the champions of Thailand. And the boxing coach was like really prolific in with a lot of athletes, and I remember doing a bit of sparring, and sparring was one thing, but then actually I had the for whatever reason I decided to enter into a competition. I just can't hold back sometimes, Paul, and it's a whole different ball game when you're out there and you stood there. Man, I tell you what, Paul, it is sort of, you're thinking, all sorts really, but your adrenaline starts going, and the key thing is, for me, it's like emotional regulation at that point. You've got to sort of stay focused. Now, you seem to be a really measured character, Paul, from what I can see. I don't know what's going on the inside, mate, but from the outside, you seem to be quite measured and calm, and so on and so forth. When you train with a cage fighter, a boxer, how do you feel when they sort of go into that ring? Do you sort of, if you're fighting, it's one thing, you got control of what you're doing to a point. But if you're watching, for me, from a training point of view, in some respects, I know it sounds a bit out there, but in some respects, it's not easy a fight, and don't get me wrong, but you feel in control. But we're out there as a coach, be it sort of working with a fighter or a footballer. Once they sort of go over in that ring or across the line, then it's over to them. How do you feel when that happens? What goes through your mind as a coach when you're watching your fighter you've been working with? Because you build a bond, don't you? You become, really, really close in many respects. How do you feel when they're out there? What goes through your mind?
Yeah, it's a funny one because, like you said, you kind of control what happens in there, but you get such a bond with them, and you feel as though you're fighting. Like 1-2% of you feel as though you're in there because you. Also, sometimes you feel responsible because you've done a lot of training. You've done the mental side, the physical side, and been a friend for them and all that as well as a build up to the fight. So you feel kind of responsible. And if you lose, you come out and think, "Bloody hell, what could I have done better to help that person?" But when they're in it, when it's pure emotion, you get a little bit of nervous energy, the last particular fight, we were sat right at the cage started superb, and you feel a rush of adrenaline when they're walking through. You start cheering, you want them to win. You're trying to do what you can at the time to motivate them. But obviously, they have the coach, the technical coach at the side as well. But honestly, it's kind of like you're in there in a way as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, for yourself, Paul, I sort of, for our listeners listening in, they're probably wondering, there's plenty of people want to get into fitness training and personal training, and, they're probably contemplating doing that either recreationally, semi-professional, maybe part-time. For me, to get involved in the field that you're in, you've got to go all out. You can't muck around. You've got to really dedicate yourself and focus. I've sort of watched your career and all the hard work you've put in. People will look at you and think, oh, okay, I'd like to be where he is, running his centre, got staff and working with like top cage fighters, footballers, sports people. But talk us through your career, how hard it has been to get there, Paul, to get to where you are. Or maybe it's just been a walk in, I don't know, but has it been tough to get there?
It's very tough. You have to think about why you're doing it. And, the reason you do it, the reason I do it is help you. I love helping people. I like passing my experience on. Moving forward, but I started off as a football coach, then as a personal trainer, and obviously because my passion is football and boxing, I've helped a lot of football and boxing just because I like that. You get a lot of coaches out there that like training golfers, but you tend to do what you're more passionate about, and then you basically do one step at a time. But it's got to be something meaningful, and you can't do it just for the money. In this type of career, it's so competitive. You can't do it for the money because you need to go the extra yard. So you've got to sit down and think, right, be calculated. Why am I doing this? Is it for the right reasons? If it's to help people and improve health, well-being, lifestyle, performance, whatever it is, you'll kind of find your own path, which obviously I spoke to you about doing. You'll find your own path as you go by, but you need to start somewhere. And I started out with a friend doing mud boot camps and things like that. Really enjoyed it, and I found I enjoyed speaking to people. I like social interaction. I like knowing what's going on in people's lives and having a chat and that type of thing, which is important. And you just develop your skills all the way through. But when I first started, I was saying to my friend the other day, I've done 50 sessions when nobody's turned up to them.
Yeah.
Genuinely. And I've been doing it 14 years now, so there's been 50 individual sessions. And I've been there at 6:30 or 7 o'clock in the morning, nobody's turned up. But you can't lose enthusiasm, you've got to keep going. I've turned up to 50 sessions when only one person's turned up.
Yeah.
So if you think about the average for 100 sessions, like, bloody hell, that's 100 sessions, like one person's turned up, it's like 0.5 average.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And if you get disheartened, if you get disheartened and think, oh, that's not for me, or you take it personally, then you will not get anywhere at all. So my motto is, you've always got to show up, you have to open up and talk to people and network, that type of thing, and you've got to be yourself and find your own leadership style. You can't mimic anyone. You can have role models, but you have to be yourself along that way. And if you're passionate about your football boxing, you go down that route. And it's the way it is. But I mean, I'm looking now. We've got 135 members. Our classes are. All the classes are full. We get like 23 plus at every session. Near enough now, but that's from 14 years to build up to this point. You know.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and you know, it's like, you know, no overnight success, that's for sure. And one thing that strikes me about your gym, and having had the privilege to deliver seminars there, and I'm there in November 23rd as well, doing a seminar. I'm really looking forward to that. One thing that strikes me when you walk through the gym, it's got that sort of family feel. Obviously, you come from a good family and good people around you, and I think how instrumental is it that you get around good people, Paul? You know, for anyone sort of looking to have a career, not just in sport, in life in general, how important do you think it is for, you know, I always sort of talk about get around people who want the best for you and you want the best for them, and how important has that been in your sort of career to make sure you keep surrounding yourself around people who want the best for you? Yeah.
Absolutely massive. You need people who care about you, because a lot of people are just going to try and do you over or take money off you, or if you're a nice person, they'll take advantage of you. You have to kind of observe that and use your instincts. If people are taking advantage, you have to weigh up. But you need that support. I'm looking from a very good family, loving family, they look after me. They care about me, things like that. And I've always had a mentor as well for the last 4.5 years.
Yeah.
So I'm a Rick Moylan mentoring program, so I joined that
Fantastic.
4.5 years ago, and that's been invaluable, because when things get tough in business or in life, you just need someone to pick up the phone to.
You do.
And they can rationalise for it. When you get a little bit emotional sometimes, you think, I've got to move gyms, I've got to move premises, I've got to get on with such a person, I've had this client has been a bit hard work, or whatever it is. Sometimes you need that someone to pick up, or even someone to text, or someone to meet for a coffee and just talk it through.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Mental health, I mean, business will really test that mental health.
Oh, absolutely, Paul.
It's how you handle that pressure and that stress, but that support system, it's got to be genuine support system, like you said as well. It's got to be authentic.
Yeah, great point.
That team of, like, you might start with 5, but that team will grow, and eventually, when you do it right, you'll have a good team of 15, 20 people around that you can call a true friend.
Absolutely.
But it takes a while to get that and build that rapport up, and you've got to learn about the ones who care and the ones who aren't really that bothered.
That's a great point, and that's something I've learnt myself over the years too. And you know, you make a great point there for anyone listening in terms of looking to make their way in sport, or just in general personal training or whatever. Really, you know, this is a sports show. We talk about sports across a broad range of areas. You know, get around people that want the best for you. And the reason being is life is hard enough as it is already anyway. You know, and the worst thing is sometimes you get people, you know, they're hangers on, Paul. You know. They're there because you're training like top class professional footballers and athletes, and they sort of they like a taste of that. But you know, when things aren't going well, they leave you carrying the bag. You know, and that's important really, because life's hard enough to do it anyway. You know, plenty of challenges out there. Like you said, I mean, it's not all sort of, you know, glory. You know, running a business, and you know, you got bills to pay, and you got things to do, and obviously, you know, there's a lot of things involved in running a business, and sort of people are probably aware anyway. But I think the key thing is, I think one thing I get the sense from you, Paul, you've got to love what you do. You know, if you don't love what you do, then if you're running your business, it's going to be a struggle, isn't it? Do you not think? If you have passion for what you do, and that'll help.
I mean, massively. Like this morning, we've been around Ramsbottom, been up Hulkerville today, Peel Tower, and then went for breakfast after with all the members. And that's what it's all about, that social interaction, that community. We've got a Christmas night coming up at Body Influence, Village Hotel. We're doing things like Tough Mudder and all that. So all the members, we love doing that for the members. You see how happy it makes them, and the positive influence it has on the rest of their life.
Yeah.
We really care about the members. So when you've got to sort out a gas bill, or sort out your business rates, or whatever it is, sort out your accounts and stuff, you don't mind doing it. Yeah, you're still tasked, you don't want to do it, but you don't mind sorting out, because it's all about them. Because you care about it, and if you didn't, you wouldn't be able to run a business successfully.
Yeah, and
you wouldn't be able to do the hard yards.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a sort of important thing, you know, what you provide in the community. I think it's really important from that point of view. Sort of, it's a communal feel, and you know, for people to have that, you know, place to go and just, you know, not just train. And it's kind of like, you know, a double-edged sword, because you go there, you train, you get in shape, but also you got people to talk to and bounce ideas. And it's like, you know, whilst you're getting in shape physically, also mentally, you know, you sort of can fine-tune yourself. Because sometimes it's just about having someone to talk to, you know, someone you can have a chat to and bounce ideas and that sort of stuff, you know, go for a walk. And obviously where you are, some, you know, really nice countryside in the area there, you go for a walk, and on a beautiful sunny day like today, nice and fresh and crisp, you go out there, man, and it's like, you know, your head gets cleared and you're on the way, you know. But it's interesting because people are listening.
Like I said, a lot of people who suffer with mental health and anxiety and things, sometimes you have to text them and try and get them to the work. Once you've done the work, they're still amazing afterwards. Like you say, close your thought, clear your mind a little bit, bounce your ideas, redirect your path that you're going on. And that's all they need sometimes, someone to open up to.
Absolutely. And have you found that, you know, is that something you're looking to do maybe in the future, like establish links with, if you haven't already done so, I'm not sure, maybe with, like, you know, say the maybe GPs and that sort of stuff, referrals and that? Is that something that sort of...
We have looked into that, and something want to do more of that, 100%, yeah. 100%, because we know the benefit it has and the positive influence it has on mental health. And
yeah, absolutely.
Just people getting out there, releasing the feel-good chemicals, the endorphins.
Yeah.
Like you said, even for your career, bounce your ideas, you end up networking with someone at the gym. Like I said, we've got 130 plus members actually. You're always going to have somebody you've got something in a similar field to, whether it's a nurse or you think about becoming a doctor, somebody else is a doctor there.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Somebody else does it there. You always find somebody, and the training is only a small part of it, really.
No, absolutely, and that's the sort of important point you make there. I mean, obviously, mental health, you know, the people always, you know, I think it's really important they get help of the appropriate mental health professional and see a GP and so on and so forth. But the two go hand in hand. If obviously they're getting the appropriate help they need to be in an environment with someone like you guys, no doubt can help and in a big way. That's a big thing, and have that community spirit is a big thing. And what about you know, the work? You've got individual footballers you're working with as well, Paul, or?
Yep. We've got quite a few. We're working close to Sam Allardyce now, who's at Oxford.
Okay.
Helping him with his progression. He wants to get into first team, which I believe he will do. So he's getting stronger and fitter every day.
Yeah.
A young player called Scott Johnson, I've been here for 4 years now. He's just joined Accrington College and he's at Ramsbottom. So he's got a big potential career ahead of him. But it's also with these players, they've all got things to fall back on.
Yeah.
They've got supportive families around them. They can also go to university if they want to and study accounts and things like that. So they kind of, their eggs aren't all in one basket, which takes the pressure off a little bit. So yeah, they're becoming a top class within football. But they're very switched on lads as well, and that's what I've noticed about the ones who do well. They're very, very level-headed.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I'm looking to work with people like this who are very level-headed and top lads, really.
Yeah, no, for sure, absolutely. I think that's a great point you've made there. You know, it's sort of, sometimes we can sort of get above that. I mean, I think all of us, you know, do it sometimes. I certainly hold my hands up. Sometimes, you know, it's easy to get caught up in things, and you know, you sort of you achieve a few things, and it's important to keep grounded and stay humble. I think for sure, you know, that's a big thing. And you know, for experience, some of the things I sort of share with the younger athletes is always, you know, be humble and be respectful to people and the people who've helped you get you there too. Always maintain that. And even if you don't agree with people, you know, it's just the way it is. And you know, sometimes you don't agree with staff, and you've got different professional ideas. But it doesn't mean that you fall out, and you're respectful of each other's ideas, you know. That's a big thing too. Everyone's got different thoughts. And do you think that's really important too, Paul, in sport? You know, not to necessarily, you're not always going to agree with people, but when you don't agree, you know, just you know, appreciate that everyone's got different views on how, you know, maybe mental skills should be done or fitness should be done as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to learn from other people and see why they think that way. And
yeah.
You've got to agree to disagree sometimes, and it doesn't mean you have to make it fine. If anything, it might change your notion and your idea, and you might develop that idea because of the way they looked at it. But I think, I respect it, as long as you can back it up with pure logic.
Absolutely, yeah, precise.
I mean, we have the mentoring program, like say once a month we get together in Manchester. and we talk about our ideas to help our members and how we're going to grow the business and give value and that type of thing. And some people have completely different ideas, but as long as they can back it up with a logistical reason, with pure logic, then I'm very respectful of them. They're not just throwing out there.
Yeah, and the thing is too, I think. Yeah, no, I also watch what people do too, Paul, and you know, you walk, you talk, you know, that's the most important thing, and you know, people that walk, they talk, you know, I mean, it's easy to talk, people say all sorts, especially these days in social media, everyone seems to have the answers, you know, and there's plenty of people criticise other people, but for me, a big one is you watch what people do, and you know, over a long period of time, not just one day or 1 week, but you watch what they do, and that's a sort of key thing. I mean, there's no fluke if you're getting, you know, people that play at the highest level, and you know, the cage fighters, the individual players, obviously the work you're doing at Bacup too. It's no fluke, you know. You don't fluke these things. Success, you know, maybe you can fluke it for 1 season or 2, but it's hard work, and there are a lot of people out there that have all the answers or profess to have them, but you know, you got to watch what they do. But I think being humble is key as well, and always sort of staying true to your roots. And I think that's a big thing too, that you put a lot back into the community, which is really important too, you know, to put back in the community in that respect too, to create that communal feel. But and yourself, Paul, your training going well? You sort of training yourself? I mean, last time I saw you, you're in pretty good shape, to be fair. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the last couple of weeks, a lot of big body influences, we've been developing and getting more members, and we've been doing a lot of planning for next year and stuff, been quite busy, but yeah, I'm feeling good. I mean, when I've not made football training, I've been doing spin sessions 3 times a week, because obviously I'm in a lucky position where we've got 16 sessions on, so I join in with the yoga and interact with the members and the coaches, but at the same time, it's very, very good for my fitness as well.
Yeah, no.
My nutrition's good. I do the 80% rule, so I eat 80% healthy and I'm trying to treat myself, so get the right protein and veg in.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So, I think that's big for business as well.
Yeah. And you got to celebrate now and again too, Paul. I guess, you know, get out there and, you know, the occasional night out. You mentioned their social groups and that sort of stuff, and I think for me, it just sort of lets off the steam, doesn't it? You know, it can be a pressure cooker sometimes, and I think you know, it's good to sort of get out there and socialise. And you do a lot. Obviously, you do a lot of events with the gym as well, which is a great thing for people, I think, to bond and have a bit of, you know, enjoyment as well. Yeah, and
I always look forward to events, and like you said, you might have a big 3-4 week block where you're working relentlessly and helping people, and then it's good to reward yourself with a little holiday or a couple of drinks in the weekend to kind of switch off a bit and then get ready again on the Sunday and Monday.
It's crucial that you take the R&R, but I'm just sort of mindful of time, Paul. It's gone so quick, mate. It's always great speaking to you as usual. You know, I want to thank you for coming on board the show. It's been fantastic, and no doubt we'll speak again in the future, Paul. So I wish you all the best for the rest of the season, and I'll be seeing you soon anyway, pal. So thanks again for joining us and sharing some of your pearls of wisdom. Thanks, Paul.
Cheers, Jimmy. Thank you very much, Jimmy.